Hello, Nasdaq followers, and welcome to a very special edition of Nasdaq Spotlight. I'm your host, Leanne Alfaro. We're coming to you live from Times Square, New York City, where I'm joined by Iman Oubou, who's founder and CEO of SWAAY Media. You may also recognize her as former Miss New York, also published scientist. Quite a resume.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. So, you're here at a very momentous time, I think, for Women's History Month, and this SWAAY Media is really a platform about women moving forward, a membership-based platform for women to tell their stories in a professional and in also personal sense. So talk to us a little bit about the inspiration for that.
Yeah, so SWAAY is a self-publishing platform for women looking to share their stories and elevate their voices. Really, the mission behind the brand and the platform is to democratize publishing for women by giving them access to editorial guidance, optimization tools, a supportive community, and a distribution platform in order to increase female representation in the media. As you know, we're vastly underrepresented from a storytelling perspective, and the idea behind SWAAY is to really change that narrative and introduce more diverse perspectives into today's most important conversations in the media.
Absolutely. And you coming from two, what may seem on surface level, vastly different fields, science, but also being Miss New York, how did that kind of fuel your leadership for this?
Well, for the longest time, felt like I was living in a double life because I was a scientist by day, and then I had to do all these appearances for, as Miss New York US. So it was like scientist by day, and then beauty queen by evening, and then on weekends. And I noticed that the more I had conversations about, what I did and who I was, a lot of people looked at me like I had three heads when I said that I was a Miss New York US and also I was a scientist. People just didn't think that a beauty queen could also be a scientist or vice versa. And, that's really when I started kind of thinking, like, why is our perspective and perception of women so, outdated? Because we are multidimensional beings,
right.
But I don't think the media really does a good job portraying that. And the reason for that is because there aren't as many women voices in the media to be able to tell our own stories and really show the world who we truly are and how we are contributing to society. And so I suppose being a scientist and a beauty queen, I always do the quotation because it's not my term, but being both really has kind of catapulted my passion to change the narrative, or as I say, sway the narrative about how we are perceived in society and in the media.
So, you go on this platform, and I took a brief look at the platform. Of course, it's membership based, so you get more when you pay to be a part of the community. There are scientists that are here writing about their daily lives and their multi-dimensional lives as well. There are professional CEOs, founders, etc. What are some of the kind of prevalent issues that you see brought up that resonate with you or you find really striking?
So we tend to encourage more women to write about topics that have been so taboo or unprioritized by mainstream media. And that could go from fertility issues, postpartum depression, pregnancy challenges, to first time being a mother, to sexism in fundraising, climbing up the corporate world, the glass cliff, the glass ceiling, all the things that we never really had a mic to talk about. And now we are using our own personal experiences and our own personal stories to shine the light on the issues at large. And I think that it's much more powerful when you hear or see an issue from someone else's perspective. And I don't like to talk about this very controversial specific topic, but let's take abortion for a second. It's, to me, as a reader, is much more powerful to hear a woman's perspective on it because she has gone through it and really dealt with the challenges around it, or why she had or she couldn't, have the child, versus a reporter who's reporting on it from an objective perspective, but may or may not ever have to go through it. So that's kind of, we're focused on first-person storytelling because we genuinely think that that's what's missing right now in the media. And I think 10 years from now, it's going to constitute a big part of how content and how media is consumed.
Absolutely. And now, I mean, you mentioned that, and you emphasize it just now, that women do focus on personal parts of their lives, but you also talk about, for example, sexism in fundraising, right? That issues that are very prevalent to people in business and building their businesses. What do you think are some of the kind of issues that people can tackle in this kind of space that perhaps they wouldn't be able to in other spaces?
When it comes to sexism?
When it comes to starting a company or being in the business space or perhaps even STEM?
Yeah. Well, I think what we want to at least bring to the table is what I call negative knowledge. So I know the media does a really great job talking about the positive knowledge from multiple entrepreneurs, multiple founders, and that means what worked for them, how they succeeded, how they became an overnight success. But what the media isn't covering as much, and I wish as a founder was able to find more of, is negative knowledge, which is what didn't work for you, what went wrong, the mistakes you made, how you failed, because I think that negative knowledge is more robust to errors, and what may have worked for an entrepreneur may not work for another one. But what hasn't worked for you as an entrepreneur probably won't work for me as an entrepreneur. So there's a lot more power to that knowledge than just painting a pretty picture of how a founder came up with an idea and overnight they became a unicorn. And so that's what we encourage a lot of women to speak more about, is what are the challenges of being a female founder? When I set out to launch SWAAY, I had no idea what I was up against, because there weren't enough stories out there about female founders overcoming a lot of the barriers I wasn't even aware of. Of course, I had to go out there and look for female mentors to really educate me on that. But I think we need to encourage more women to be real about it, more authentic about the experience. And that's really what the power of storytelling is. It's not about writing. It's about power, having power, reclaiming your power. And so I see SWAAY as a platform where you can come and reclaim that power, because now you have a voice that you can use to inspire other women that may be going through a similar experience as you.
So it's not just per se like an Instagram reel. It's not just documenting your highs. It's documenting the journey and sharing that journey with other people. So we are definitely seeing the rise of co-working spaces and co-working spaces for women, and in general communities for women, to be able to build it on an online platform and in such a scalable way is certainly an impressive feat. What do you think are some of the takeaways for people looking to build these communities in their respective fields?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to remember that when community is your main product or your main asset, it's important to prioritize retention and engagement as much as, or even more than, growth and scale. Because if you're not engaging and incentivizing your community to continually come back to you and use your platform or services or space or whatever that may be, it's really hard to scale and grow and really cultivate a community that is actually engaged. So it's important to remember that from the get-go, and that's a mistake I also made, is I was chasing growth and scale instead of actually focusing on activating the community I already built to be an advocate for the brand out there, and have that word of mouth and be able to evangelize for the brand. It's something that now we're working backwards for, and we're putting together systems and operational processes that make sure that as we scale and grow, the community mission and the community values are still the same as we grow, because that's a risk that you have to take when you start growing, is sometimes you lose sight and you lose track of the values that you wanted to build the community around.
And that's definitely very actionable advice for founders. What about for perhaps people from companies, like established corporate companies that have their affinity groups and they're trying to build out their, for example, at Nasdaq, Women at Nasdaq programs, or programs for people, for women in STEM and finance? What kind of takeaways do you have for these community builders within existing companies already?
Yeah. Well, I would say that, events are always great, and networking, setups and events are also good in order to help women advance for their careers. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that sometimes women just want to come together and have a safe community in place to just vent or talk, just to be heard. So I don't think that every community should be built on the basis of networking or doing business. I think there has to be some communities that just allow women to have a safe space to find someone to talk to, because even as founders or sometimes women at the very top of corporations, it's a lonely path. So finding communities that just allow you to be you and talk about it is important. There shouldn't always be an agenda behind the community setup. There shouldn't always be a networking component to it. And that's also what we focus on is, yes, we do events every now and then. Yes, some women on the platform are able to network with each other, but we've been referred to as kind of a content mentorship platform, because it's really just about mentoring each other through talking about certain issues and through sharing our own stories that can help, you know, others that might be on that journey. So that's kind of my takeaway, at least on the communities, because we have a lot of women communities nowadays, as you can imagine, and we're both part of a lot of them. But what I find that is redundant and repetitive is that it's always about networking. It's always about exchanging business cards. What can you do for me? What can I do for you? And that's not the mindset that we need to have when we talk about community.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more, 100%. So looking forward to SWAAY Media and kind of the evolution of this particular community for women, I mean, I would say it's pretty historic in the way that you're bringing women together and providing the platform. What kind of evolutions do you see for it in the coming year?
Yeah, well, thank you. Being a unique model is also challenging, because I now, as a founder, as a CEO, I spend a lot of my time actually meeting and talking one-on-one to a lot of our members, and I don't want to be out of touch with the community we're building. But I think that as we grow and scale, there are a lot of opportunities to take this not just from an editorial publishing platform, but also being able to help women publish books one day. Or how do we continually elevate women's voices across different areas, from editorial to podcasts to broadcasting, all the way to publishing. That's all really the mission behind SWAAY, is how do we continually push for women to be heard, to have a voice in the areas that matter the most, but also how do we give them the tools to do that in a way that is comfortable for them. Because even to this day, a lot of women still discount themselves. They have to constantly be reminded that they are sitting on powerful stories and knowledge that can help change the narrative and shape a new story for ourselves. But a lot of them are a little bit, they're shy about putting themselves out there. So for us, being able to build not just a community, but also a platform that offers the right tools and guidance to help them through that process of being comfortable with putting themselves out there, is at the core of the brand.
No, absolutely. And for other women who may be in one particular industry now, I mean, if I think about it, there's at least 3 careers that I mentioned in this interview that you've transitioned from, or not transitioned, you've done some of them in conjunction. So for women who are trying to take the leap from wherever they may be into entrepreneurship, what advice would you provide to them?
Well, the big question first to ask yourself is, why do you want to be an entrepreneur? I myself didn't really set out to be an entrepreneur. It was led by my own frustration of being a woman in science, being a woman navigating a predominantly male world. So I never really set out to launch a business, but I had to really do it because I thought it was my responsibility to solve an issue that I experienced and I knew other women experienced. So the biggest question to ask yourself is, why do you want to do it? Because your startup is going to be a reflection of who you are. And if you're launching a startup or going into entrepreneurship to make money or for short gains, then that's going to be reflected on your startup. It's going to show that there's a lack of authenticity. If you're going into entrepreneurship or launching a startup because you think you're pursuing a market opportunity that is not really solving a problem, then that's going to show in your startup as, it's not reflecting that you have a fully developed concept. So again, I know there's a lot of books around this. Simon Sinek it starts with why, and that's a really important question, because your why is what's going to help you in days where money is not there, in days where you wake up and all of a sudden you find yourself broke. So
absolutely, you take it 365, 24/7.
Yeah, so absolutely, start with your why.
Knowing your why. That's a great way to end the interview. Iman, thank you so much for providing us some insight on SWAAY Media, and we really hope to have you back in studio soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, Nasdaq followers, please stay tuned for more coverage coming to you right here from the Nasdaq market site. Until then, we are signing off.